All right. We're going to let this stream get started here. Takes a moment to warm up every time we do this. But welcome everyone to the Weekly Wrangle. If you don't know, the Weekly Wrangle alternates between career topics, industry interviews, and live art reviews. And today is the live art review. So as we're hanging out here, feel free to add questions, comments, whatever you'd like here in the chat. I'm going to add my own comment here just to say hi to everyone. And as we go along, I'd be happy to hang out and answer any questions along the way, or just, talk about CGI stuff with y'all. Now, I also want to mention that right now I'm still getting the time correct here for the live Weekly Wrangle. What happened is that I just made a brand new computer, and for some reason, Microsoft wants to set my computer clock to LA time, even though I live in Mountain time. So when this stream was getting set up, it accidentally got set for an hour later than I wanted to. And so we're going live here at kind of a weird time. So sorry about that. But it's very exciting that I have a brand new computer, and I want to share that journey with you all, because this is probably the first time I've done this, which is build a new computer, in like about 10 years, which is amazing. So I don't know if you guys have ever made your own computer before, but it is a process, and I cataloged this journey here for us to go through. This was the first box of parts that came through, and as you can see, it took probably about 10 minutes for me to get this out of the Amazon locker. Naturally, right? There's a lot of stuff that gets sent through the mail, and yeah, this is how things started off, getting wedged in there. But then eventually, broke apart all the different old components. This was the old computer that I had right here. Tore it up, put it out there on the table. I did end up saving a few components from the old computer, by the way. I had a couple of GPUs that I'm using right now, the 4070 Ti Supers, which, by the way, I got at a great price. I got at a great price because it was just when the 50 series was first coming out. So they were trying to get rid of all the 40 series cards at Micro Center, and I got them for like about $700 a piece. Since then, because the 50 series hasn't been that great, right now I think for a 4070 Super Ti, it's actually gone up by about $300 to $400 per card. So anyway, really proud of that. But yeah, I tore it up. And then I realized, oh, look at that. I have a 420 millimeter radiator that didn't fit in the old case. This thing's a monster, by the way. This is about as big as radiators get when it comes to cooling your CPUs. So naturally, I had to go take a trip over to Micro Center, walking through the valley of computer cases and components. And look at that. I found me a nice case. This is the, I think it's the, what is it? A Leon Evo XL. I have it right here. Yeah, the Leon 011 Dynamic Evo XL case. And I didn't know how much I was about to spend on a case, but apparently it's a lot more if you have a 420 millimeter radiator that you're trying to put in there. So I did that, started putting things together. It took about 2 days to build this, and this right here was about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 or 2 in the morning. So I was working from about 8 in the morning till about 1 or 2. So yeah, long day of putting stuff together, but eventually it all came together. This is almost complete. I actually have 2 cards that get plugged in eventually here, but when it was all said and done, look at this. Here's the final build. Turned out amazing. And this new computer is smoking fast, by the way. About 3 to 4 times faster than my old computer. More specifically, I went with the 9950X CPU, this MSI X670E motherboard, that 420 millimeter radiator that you saw for cooling the CPU, 256 gigabytes of RAM, tuned at 5600 megahertz, so that's really fast. Two of the 4070 Ti Supers, 4 terabytes on a 9100 Pro SSD, which is a super fast SSD that's also plugged into a Gen 5 PCIe slot, by the way, that's dedicated just to the CPU. So that's even faster. It's not sharing bandwidth with my GPU or anything. And then that huge case and a bunch of LED fans for the intakes and exhaust. Funny enough, for whatever reason, these fans were the hardest thing for me to figure out. I don't know why. I just had a hard time wrapping my head around them for some reason. I guess because there's a lot of routing and I wanted to make it look clean. But yeah, anyway, the final results ended up being great. And so far, this new computer has been incredible. So while we're on the topic, I was thinking about doing a special episode today talking about how to build your own computer. What are some of the different things to consider, stuff like that. And so for anyone that's interested in doing so, you can save a lot of money by building your own computer, especially once you get to the high-end components build like I have here. I'd say I'd probably save myself about $2,000 to $3,000, if not more, just by building it myself. And sure, there's, a lot of things you have to figure out, and it takes a little bit of know-how and this and that. But honestly, if you can figure it out, you'll save yourself a ton of money. And you'll probably get better components anyway, because a lot of the pre-builds use refurbished components or just the lower quality components that get put into a lot of the pre-builds. So you're really getting the best stuff for cheaper when you do it yourself. And just to show you what it might look like, if I did a pre-built that was even a little bit similar to what I have right now, and this still isn't as good, we're already up to like $5,000. And I don't know the final number of what my build is here. I'd have to recalculate that, but it's not that much when it's all said and done. Yeah, like I said, you'll save like $2,000 or $3,000, sometimes 40 to 50% when you build it yourself. And it is definitely worth it if you have the patience for it. Now, if you're someone who is trying to build yourself, I just want to mention that the way that I started this whole thing, this whole process, if you want to get started, is thinking about the CPU. So many of you have probably heard of Passmark before, but if you haven't, this website is a decent measure of how fast things are for your CPU and how fast things are for your GPU as well. And you can go through here and find a lot of really interesting statistics on the different models. So when I was shopping here, I would start with this because this will determine your motherboard options, and the motherboard is like the big thing that everything plugs into. So that's why I start here. But if you go to the single-threaded performance, I think a lot of people always glaze over single-threaded performance. This was my main convincing factor for going with the 9950X right here. It's $530, and it has incredible single-core performance, and it also has pretty decent multi-core performance as well, or multi-thread performance. If you don't know the difference, the way that I explain it is that when you have a CPU, it's like a collection of brains inside of that chip, and the brains can think of different things. So as an example, if let's say you create a node in Houdini, like the remesh node, that remesh node is going through a bunch of math, and it's going to use the brains in your CPU to calculate that math, right? A single-threaded performance is how fast one of the tiny little brains is inside of that CPU. And I'm just generalizing here. I know it's a little bit more complicated than this, but that's pretty much what single-threaded means. Multi-threaded means that it's a task that can use all the little tiny brains in your computer or in the CPU at the same time. So a lot of people go for the multi-threaded performance, and that's true, especially if you are rendering with a CPU render. So for instance, if you're going through tons of heavy data. You don't want to rely on the VRAM on your graphics card, and you just want to have a super fast renderer, a CPU renderer on your computer. This multi-threaded performance is where this really shines. But what also shines is how expensive all of this is. I mean, gosh, if you go here to one of the craziest multi-threaded CPUs, you're at $12,000 or $13,000, which at that point you could start building a server room. I mean, it's really crazy. So with the way that I use Houdini, I'm rendering with GPUs. I have many things I do that are single threaded, and the multi-threaded performance is still not too bad on this 9950X. It's still within the top 100 of that list I just showed you, which is really good at $500. So my thought was, hey, here's the best of all different worlds, and that's why I went with that. And then all the other parts kind of were made to then fit with the motherboard, and that's kind of how you go from there. So anyway, if you're interested in building your own PC, go here to PC Part Picker and start playing around a little bit. Just say start your build and start with your CPU, your motherboard, and then have fun from there. Another channel that I like watching a lot for PC components is Gamers Nexus here, if you've never heard of him. Really great channel. Love all the stuff that Steve does here. And yeah, his reviews are top notch. So as you're going through, if this is something that you want to nerd out to, like me, and have fun with, that's pretty much how I did all of this. And I did a fair amount of Chat GPT as well. The combination of all those things can help you build your own computer. But let me know here in the chat, if you're watching, if this topic is something you're interested in me doing more of. I had an idea of throwing together a Wrangle that has a very budget-friendly build, a medium build, and a more expensive build. I just got done with the expensive build myself, but if you want something that's more budgets or medium build, that could be something we get into, and I could talk about why I chose certain parts, and we can have fun getting into that. So if that's a topic that you want me to cover in the future, let me know in the comments. It'll take a bit of work for me to put together, so I only want to do it if you guys are interested. But I thought that might be a fun idea at some point. Okay, so let's now move on to the art reviews. After all, that is the theme of today. And with these art reviews, I'm going to switch over to the beginner bootcamp renders that have been coming through. If you don't know what the beginner bootcamp is, it is awesome. And it's really been incredible so far. The beginner bootcamp is 5 weeks of us going through everything beginner that is going to set you in the right direction with Houdini. So if you want to feel more confident in Houdini and you want to learn with other people, connect with them, work on exercises and tasks that are ideal for someone who's just starting out, if you're feeling overwhelmed in Houdini, then the beginner bootcamp is designed to help you get on track and hopefully more confident in Houdini so that you're not struggling as much with whatever topic you're trying to get into. So like I said, 5 weeks, you can watch the replays here. But starting this week, which we're on week 2 right now, I'm going to be doing exercises. Well, week 1 has exercises, but I'm going to be creating unique exercises just for the boot camp here this week. And for that, you'll need to actually join live to get the link and to download it all. But the replays are here. It's not too late to join if that's interesting to you. And yeah, would love to have you join in the fun with everyone. We're just getting started right now. Okay, that being said, when we look at these different renders that came in, it was some really cool stuff. I was excited to see all the different things. So I just want to show this first one here. Jesh51516 came up with this first render. And I want to mention the challenge here was to take Houdini for the New Artist 1 and then spin it off into your own thing. So go to Fab, download a model, and just render it out with some kind of backdrop and see how good you can make a very simple rendering workflow look. That's the challenge here for week 1. And already, I mean, really cool. Spaceship, outer space, like nebula stuff, right? Yeah. And what I love about this whole challenge here is that everyone's coming up with different things that are really cool. So I want to go through the art review that I already did here for Jesh and just talk about some ideas on how to make this better here. Okay. So one of the first things I did, and this is actually a really fun technique to try yourself, is I took Jesh's image and I put it inside of Midjourney. And then I just had some adjectives that I added to it. So I said, take this spaceship, it's in outer space, make it feel more cinematic and epic. Feel free to change the framing, do whatever it takes to just make it more cinematic, right? And it came up with some really cool stuff here in Midjourney. And as you could see, it also gave us a who-teen and who-deen, who-ditten. So these are all just generalizations, right? I mean, you don't want to take any of these to heart, but it gives us good ideas. Like when I look at the planet backdrop right here, I'm like, man, that's really cool. Maybe we should switch up the backdrop to some kind of epic planet instead of the nebula space backdrop. Really cool idea. When it came to lighting, we could see here on this image that we have a nice way that light is wrapping around the edges and creating form along this object. Anytime that you have that going on, it's going to make things feel more three-dimensional, and that's going to make things pop out from the composition a bit more. So it can give us ideas, and that's my whole point here. Here we have at the bottom left, I don't know if you can see that, it's probably not. Let me zoom out here a little bit. Well, that's okay. We'll take this as an example. Look at where these lights are on the spaceship. So we have dark areas and light areas. That's going to make things feel more detailed and complex and sort of contrasted out in a way that catches your eye and brings it towards the spaceship. So what I'm saying here is that if you take whatever render you're working on, you put it through Midjourney, and you give it some descriptions, you can start making these observations of things you like, and then that can become the blueprint for improving your own things in Houdini. And that's exactly what we did here. So on this, I said, you know, pay attention to the wrapped light. We can change the angle to do that. And switch out the backdrop. If you wanted to do a nebula thing, I made this backdrop nebula in Midjourney as well. Looks super cool. Like that would work if you didn't want to do a planet. And yeah, again, just looking at the lighting here on the spaceship, that can make things glow, going dark and bright. Cool little green light underbelly right there as well to the spaceship. All kinds of cool ideas. So based on that, I thought Jesh did a great job of doing his own thing and just taking this in his own direction. So here is the next iteration of this project. And there were still some more changes I wanted to make here to help this pop from the backdrop. But in general, like, look how cool this new direction is going. And just in one iteration, I feel like this is starting to cook up and become a lot more interesting. So I guess what I'm going with here is, in your own projects, try that Midjourney approach to give yourself ideas, and then don't take that as like a blueprint exactly, but take it as something to bounce off of. And then that can start enhancing your own renders with interesting decisions. So in that case, you know, I gave another round of feedback. This was all about how to make a subject pop from the backdrop. And here's a test, by the way, that if you guys haven't done before is really worth doing. What you do is you take your render and you make it really small on the screen. So in this case, I can barely tell what this is. And that's the point. If you take your image and you can barely see what's going on, can you see the main subject? Can you actually, tell what's there, or is it just not easy to distinguish what's in that scene? If you can't tell what's there, most likely you're not doing enough to pop the subject away from the backdrop. And more likely, you need to change your lighting in such a way where it emphasizes the subject that you want to focus on. So this is a great trick that I also do with lighting. And based on that, I came up with a few ideas. So I said, hey, we need to pop this from the backdrop. So here, take a rim and make this light so we have a silhouette. We can also have the lighting, the key lighting, go warm here to reflect all the lava lighting that's coming up. So we can do an up lighting key. And then in the middle here, if we darken this, it's going to create contrast. So we can darken the middle here, have the rim popping, and I didn't put it in here, but you can then also place your glowing lights there as well to create even more contrast. And then the more areas of contrast you have, the more strong that object becomes to the viewer's eye, and the more it starts going in that direction. So I'm really curious to see what Jesh does with this. I think it's off to a really awesome start. And, or Jesh, if I didn't say that right. And yeah, anyway, super cool project. Okay, well, let's go. I talked a little bit about this as well. This was just some more technical feedback on the modeling. This is a great first render too, by the way. Totally different vibe. Love the Gothic style. We talked a little bit about like stained light, God rays, maybe making this more interesting, or, taking the geometry here and just making it more high res and better textured, stuff like that. But anyway, I want to move on to some of these projects that I haven't done a review for yet, so that I can share that with everyone else. So the first one here is something that came in yesterday from Lord Leonan, and we have a delicious pastry with a chocolate glaze over the top. Okay, so first of all, as a first project, I think it's great. Let me just start by saying that. I mean, getting into a little simulation and having this render out and the whole thing, definitely great job for your first project, right? Now, what I want to mention is something that is subtle but extremely important here, okay? When you are a beginner and you're figuring things out for the first time, you're kind of just trying to survive, right? Houdini is really difficult to pick up at first, and you're just trying to like get something out the door, and that's great. But you have to keep in mind that the end goal here needs to be to create imagery that invokes a feeling, that invokes a vibe, that transcends just something that technically got done. And so what I mean, and where I'm going with this, is that when I look at a pastry, when I look at this render here, is it technically a pastry with a chocolate glaze on it? Yes, it is. But why? How does that make me feel? Like, why should I care about that? Why should anyone look at this image and care? And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that because we want to try to infuse our render images with the feeling you get when you enter a room and there's a vibe. And as an example here, like, let's say we take this whole idea here. What if we try to make this render a bit more of like a cozy, kitchen in France out in the countryside with morning light going through the window, and it's early in the morning and you just see, maybe some God rays hit this pastry, and it just gives you that cozy vibe, right? That's a feeling you get when you enter a room and you see something. And it also starts creating a bit of a story as well. That's something that can be done here. And rather than just technically doing the thing, you want to try to aspire to that feeling you get in the real world when you experience a moment with something, right? So, my biggest critique is that I don't think this captures that vibe yet. I think technically you did the thing, correct? But it doesn't invoke an emotion. It doesn't have purpose yet. And that's something that's not easy to do. And it's kind of abstract feedback, but is crucial if you want to reach that higher level of quality in your work. So, yeah. And that would be up to you on like what kind of vibe do you want to make with this thing, right? But I would just say for all beginners and not just this render, that's a big thing to aspire to. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. Talk about something else. This one here is by L. L dot 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 dot. So L did a great job with this flower. And again, really great first render. I could see there's some subsurface scattering here, which always looks nice on flowers. I love how the light hits up here and then it's a little bit darker down here. You want that variation because it creates depth. If you just had light evenly backlighting this whole flower, it would feel very flat and it wouldn't feel as dimensional. Also, the shallow depth of field makes this feel dimensional, where you can just reach back into the frame and there would be some kind of depth to it. That's also a really good quality to aspire to in your own images. So yeah, the question is, what would take this up to the next level? Well, one thing that stood out to me is that I like this gradient backdrop, but it could be better. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I still think it's nice to have a subtle backdrop, but you'll notice that because of image compression, when you have a backdrop, you get this banding that happens. And it's something that I run into all the time as well, where it's like, at the end of the day, this is going to be viewed on a TV screen or in some kind of compressed format. And the problem with doing gradients in Photoshop or whatever is that it's going to create this banding because you're working with 8-bit images. So what I always suggest doing for backdrops is to treat that as a subject in its own. It's not your main subject, but it is a subject within your frame, something that often takes up like 50% of the whole image. And it's very easy to forget about it. What you could do is you could take some subtle wallpaper, just like floral wallpaper, and put it back there. Keep your shallow depth of field if you want. That's fine. You can even keep these colors, but having just a little bit of pattern will break up the banded compression back here. And it also just creates a vibe. I mean, that's just one idea, right? But just having something back there so it's not obviously like a Photoshop gradient, I think will add a nice bit of complexity and make it feel like it belongs in a scene of some kind. I mean, like I was just saying in the last image, taking something from I did the thing to a story and a vibe and something that can evoke a feeling when you look at it, that is where you want to go. So that would be a nice, easy thing to do there. Looking here at the rest of the flower, I like the lighting here. I'm kind of almost thinking it might be a good idea to have a little bit more lighting here at the center of the flower. It just feels maybe a bit dark for my personal taste. I don't know. What you could do as well is you could take an area light with a gobo and have like some speckled lights hitting this thing as well. So it's not just like an even lighting. Maybe you keep this in as like, a general fill light, but maybe your key has like some kind of windowsill shadow effect or something like that, just to break up the shadows with the texture. That could be another way of introducing some complexity. And depending on the vibe you're going for, it could also add a bit of a vibe. So I think that would be really cool. Love the droplets here. Really nice addition to the whole thing. You could just do that with some scattered points and doing like a copy to points as an example. But yeah, really love this flower. I think it's awesome. And great job, El. Okay, this next one here is from Bjorn. And this is a raven. Really love this. And we were just talking about an area light with a gobo and how when you have these speckled lights happening, when you have these interesting shadows, it just adds so much integration into the scene. I think another thing as well that I see a lot in beginner renderers is that, again, like you have the thing, it got done, but it just doesn't feel like it belongs in a world yet. It doesn't feel like it's integrated or that it's interacting with any kind of world. And that interaction, just in general with CGI, no matter what you're doing, is one of the most important qualities to add to any project. And that's, by the way, I think a philosophy that's way more significant than it may first seem. But if you're doing animation, if you're doing effects, you're doing modeling, texturing, you're doing any of it, interaction is often what brings something to the next level. So having that, that little dust interaction when a foot stomps on the ground, or in this case, using your lights to have the interaction of something off screen affect what we see on screen. That's all interaction. And it's all about engrossing yourself in that world that you're trying to create. So anyway, back to the raven here. Looks awesome. What would take this here to the next level? I think animating this would be the first thing. Let's get some camera movement going on here. I do like how a rim light is bringing out the silhouettes. That works nicely. If we were to zoom out, we would be able to still tell that there is a raven there, which is awesome. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty solid for a first project and for the challenge here. I mean, I would say the next thing is just to animate it. That's the main thing. And then maybe also think about doing a vignette on the corners so that it brings a bit more attention towards the raven. Very subtly. I don't make my vignettes very, noticeable. I want it to be felt. I don't want it to be noticed. But that could also add to this vibe. So yeah, great job there. Okay, well, this one just came through from T. Follow the Houdini revolver modeling videos. Nothing crazy for the background and lighting. I know, more of a modeling exercise, but I'm open to feedback. Nice. Well, this is great. Let's see. Before we go here, this is a question by Arnav. Can we upload even if most of it wasn't made in Houdini? Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm down to do art reviews for anything you got in CGI. So yeah, feel free to do that. But yeah, this revolver, looking awesome, especially for a modeling exercise. And by the way, this is why in Houdini for the New Artist 1 and for the Beginner Bootcamp, I want everyone to have a basic rendering workflow. Because no matter what you're doing, even if you just want to model, you still need to present your work as best as you can. And, that just applies to everyone. If you're doing animation, rigging, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to be able to present your stuff, present nicely, I should say. So Arnav, let me give you that link real quick. So just go here to the Discord, CG Forge Discord. I'll put it here in the chat. There you go. And then feel free to put that in the project feedback section right here, and I'll take a look. Yeah, so anyway, back to the revolver. I think this is great. One of my main things, though, is that it does feel a little bit dark here, and I feel like it needs a key light right now. It's backlit, which is cool, but I do feel like the main areas that we're interested in are getting a bit dark. And so, yeah, that's something I would, maybe change on the lighting here. Just put it a bit more in the front. But as far as the modeling goes, really cool. I mean, it's great to go through the modeling exercises. You also have a lot of nice shading and texturing here on the wood handle. So I think that's nice. Looking here at the texturing, well, first of all, a couple of things. If you're not rendering in 1920 by 1080, I would suggest doing so. It looks like actually you're using Apprentice, so that's not possible, but eventually you want to render that. And it's also a bit grainy here. These reflections have a lot of grain. So in Karma, you'll want to go through and change your samples on that. I believe if you're using XPU, you can go to the Advanced tab and turn down your variance threshold to like 0.005 or 0.0075, and that should take care of the grain. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that should take care of some of these areas like that are getting a little chunky. So yeah, I would say just focus on that. On the texturing here as well, I would add a bit more variety to the steel. Probably anisotropic highlights would be a good thing to focus on if you haven't put that in there yet. And just in general, I found that even having just the slightest bump in your metal, and I mean slightest, that shows the manufacturing process of like, maybe this barrel, I don't know, had like some kind of like scratched circles around it based on how it was cut. You'd have to look at reference, but even just the slightest bit makes metal feel a lot more realistic. But as far as like a modeling demo, a modeling showcase, I think it turned out really nice. So great job there, T. Looks awesome. Okay, let me look at the chat again. It says invalid link, Arnav is saying. Oh, that's not ideal, is it? I don't know why. I feel like this has happened a few times to the Discord link. Yeah, well, just send me a message, support@cgforge.com, Arnav, and I'll be happy to, send you a link there. But yeah, for now, let's continue going on here. So we have this one by L, it looks like. And it looks like we have some cool condensation, watery effects happening here with the droplets. So create a water droplet with Houdini, but rendering in Cinema 4D with Octane. Sweet. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, just looking at this, what can I say? I think one of the first impressions I have is that, again, thinking about interaction, why are the water droplets showing up in these different spots? So like, this obviously looks like condensation, but where would that condensation take place? Would it take place here on the lid? Most likely not. Most likely you just got this out of the fridge, and the areas with the cold liquid are going to be the ones that have that difference of hot and cold with the air and generating this condensation. So one of my first impressions is to reconsider the condensation here on the lid and then have it be wherever the water or liquid would be. And that would add a bit of interaction to it. The other thing I'll mention is the backdrop. Again, we kind of mentioned this before, but you want to think of a backdrop as a subject, just like your main subject is. And that subject should support your main subject. So right now we just have a flat black color. But what would happen if you change that up and you had something in the backdrop that could emphasize or bring the viewer towards the main subject? That would be something that takes it to the next level for sure. Even if it's a shallow depth of field of some kind, that could add a lot. The other thing as well is that with the composition, I think you're getting really close here to the edges. You always want to give yourself some breathing room from the edges. So I would zoom out a bit and try to keep it maybe like right along here as like the topmost part of any subject. So always allow a little bit of spacing from your borders, from your edges. And yeah, I think all those things would take it up to the next notch here. Okay, good. I'm glad, Arnav, you got that figured out with the verification. Okay, so let's check it out. This is the art station here. Oh yeah, this is awesome, man. Let me see what happened here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's check it out here. So Arnav, really cool scene right here. A little side project to introduce myself to Unreal Engine. Wanted to do it real time. And concept art found on Pinterest. Very nice. Yeah, another thing as well that I want to mention is that as you guys are thinking about big projects, really consider getting some concept art from a concept artist. By getting, I mean like asking if it's okay to use it on your projects, or just making quick little ideas in Midjourney or something like that. But having something to, I guess, spark inspiration, try out compositional ideas, explore interesting topics. That's a great idea before you start any major project. And here it's, nice to have that concept art as well. So anyway, let's talk about this for a second. In terms of artistic feedback and lighting and this and that, one of the first things that I noticed was the shading on some of the glass bottles here. And this could be a limitation of Unreal Engine. I'm not entirely certain, but to me, it feels more plasticky as opposed to glass. And that could be because this glass is fogged up a bit, but it's like evenly fogged up. So if you have roughness in your transparency, sometimes you run the risk of it feeling a little bit plastic if you're not careful. And I think that could be what's happening here. Or maybe plastic is the intention. I'm not sure. But since there's so many bottles here, I would say that focusing in on the glass shader that you're using is definitely something that you don't want to underestimate because it's taking up so much of this image. So that's one thing that I think could take it up a notch. I love the ivy here. I love how you have the ivy that's just on the ceiling. It's going over the window. If anyone's watching here and has been to Nashville before, there used to be a incredible tea shop called High Garden. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. It unfortunately got blown down in a tornado that almost killed me. I think it was 2017, 2018. But anyway, when you went into High Garden, it had this vibe. It was like wood everywhere. It was really cozy. There was like dry herbs on the ceiling. It had such a cool vibe to it. It kind of reminds me of this a little bit in a good way. So as far as the vibe check, like I definitely am getting a vibe and it's bringing me back to a place I've been in my life before, which is always a good sign that you're hitting, that you're striking a chord with the scene. But anyway, looking at all of this, you are clipping quite a bit with this lights back there. Again, could be a limitation of Unreal. I'm not sure, but that's something that may or may not be a good thing. Just kind of depends. I will say though, that once you start clipping down here a little bit, I like the overall vibe, but it just feels a little too glowy. And at a certain point, you do start losing detail, which becomes a con. So I would just be careful of, in my opinion, I like hot highlights a little bit more just stylistically than other people do. But if you are going to do it, use it just a little bit, like it's like a little bit of cayenne pepper in there. Too much, it starts flattening out your detail and starts, I think, looking like a cheap camera that took an image of something. And yeah, adding some dust. I was going to say that as the next thing as well. Everything does feel very pristine. It doesn't feel aged enough, in my opinion, to really, hit that kind of rustic antique vibe, if that's what you're going for, which I feel like it is. For that, it would really come down to texturing and just trying to reevaluate the wear and tear that these different things would have. And for that, you'll just have to look at reference. Think again of interaction and story. If I look at a barrel down here at the bottom left, and I'm thinking about wear and tear, well, why would that thing have wear and tear? How exactly would that happen over time? When you add grunge, when you add this wear and tear, be intentional about why it's receiving this thing and don't just blindly put on some grunge. So that's one thing I would say is, again, interaction, thinking through everything, trying to be as decisive as you can about why things are the way they are, that's going to always serve you well. But yeah, overall, really cool. I immediately got a vibe from this, and that's always a good sign. And I don't have time to go through all of these different projects, but it looks like you're doing great stuff. I really like the vent stuff. That looks super cool. The stuff with the cars. Yeah, you're doing great work here. So great job, Arnav. I like it. Okay, where are we at here on time, everyone? We're about 40 minutes in. Let me go back to project feedback. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. I'm going to just check one more spot here, the project feedback. Yeah, and it looks like we don't have as much going on here. So yeah, anyway, like I said, if you want to join in the fun, we are just getting started here with the boot camp. There's already lots of people that have signed up. I haven't seen how many people that have registered recently, but last I checked, it was over 200 people. So it's really just cooking up nicely. And this week, I'll have a lot of great exercises for people that want to hop in the boot camp and join in. Last but not least, if you have any other questions or if you want me to review stuff in the future, shoot me an email, support@cgforge.com, and I'd be happy to take a look. So yeah, that does it for now. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you all have an excellent day. I'm also going to give this stream a couple of seconds to catch up because last time I ended it very abruptly.